September 1943, high above the industrial heartland of the German Reich. Altitude, 25,000 feet. The year is a turning point, marked by a brutal, strategic chess match played in the thin, cold air, the high-stakes game of daylight precision bombing. But tonight this isn't about victory. It's about a failure that will unintentionally expose a deep, terrifying truth to the enemy. The consolidated B-24 Liberator. To the bomber crews who flew it, it was an ungainly, cold and often unloved beast, overshadowed by the graceful, rugged Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress. The Liberator was the ugly duckling of the American heavy bomber fleet. It was a utilitarian machine, boxy and cavernous, a testament not to aerodynamic beauty, but to sheer brutal efficiency and the staggering power of American mass production. Yet within its awkward, slab-sided fuselage lay a secret, a design philosophy forged not in elegance, but in the grim mathematics of survival. This particular Liberator, codenamed the Belle of Berlin, was part of a deep penetration raid. Her mission, a ball-bearing factory near Schweinfurt. Her destiny to become an intelligence goldmine for the Third Reich. A burst of 88mm flak finds its mark. It doesn't explode the aircraft. It tears away a section of the outer wing, crippling 2 engines. The pilot, Captain Robert Sterling, fights the controls, wrestling with a wounded giant, trying to keep it airborne long enough for his crew to bail out. But the Luftwaffe is merciless. Irony is the cruel currency of war. The Germans initially held this bomber in mild disdain. They saw the B-24 as an easier target than the more heavily armored B-17. The thinner wing profile, the less rounded fuselage, it looked more fragile. Their pilots, highly skilled and flying the sleek, powerful Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, nicknamed it the boxcar, slow, easy to hit, and seemingly made of paper. What the Luftwaffe did not yet grasp, what the Gestapo officers who would soon crawl through its wreckage could not fathom, was that the B-24's design was not one of mere vulnerability, but of distributed industrial resilience. It was the physical manifestation of a strategy of attrition, a machine designed not just to fly, but to absorb punishment and keep fighting. The boxy shape allowed for easier production lines. The high wing, the Davis wing, gave it unparalleled range and altitude, and crucially, the capacity to carry a disproportionate amount of defensive weight. Captain Sterling recalled the moment in his post-war debriefing. When the Gestapo arrived, they weren't interested in us. They were interested in the plane. They treated it like some kind of alien carcass. I remember one officer running his hand over the bomb bay doors, shaking his head. It was like they were looking at the future, and they didn't like what they saw. This single captured airframe would begin to dismantle years of German industrial and tactical arrogance. It wasn't the bombs it carried that would shake the foundations of the Reich. It was the skin that held it together. The investigation of the Belle of Berlin was about to uncover a difference in engineering philosophy, a shift from the precision-crafted, low-volume fighter planes of the Reich to the staggering, brutal, and massively protected war machines rolling off the assembly lines of Detroit and San Diego. The numbers themselves told a story of industrial scale that Germany could never match. The Liberator, the most mass-produced American military aircraft in history, was a flood of metal designed for simplicity of manufacture. Yet, this simplicity was deceptive. Every rivet, every overlapping sheet of aluminum, every piece of internal gear was a lesson in how to build a giant that could not only deliver a payload over unprecedented distances, but could survive the return journey after taking a beating that would utterly disintegrate its contemporaries. The Germans, relying on small numbers of highly skilled interceptor pilots, flying aircraft built for speed and dogfighting, suddenly faced a strategic industrial reality. They could shoot down 1 or 2 or 20, but there were literally thousands more coming, and now they would discover why these giants were so hard to kill. The focus of the technical intelligence team would turn forensic, examining not the bomb site, not the engines, but the subtle, unglamorous layers of protection that kept the bloodied but unbowed American crews flying home. The suspense begins now. What engineering secrets were locked within this metallic prison? This journey into the heart of the B-24's defensive architecture will change how we view the strategic bombing war. If you want to see how American ingenuity and industrial might turned a despised airframe into a strategic nightmare for the Luftwaffe, make sure you don't miss the upcoming chapters. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories of the Second World War. The B-24 was born not in a designer's elegant sketchbook, but on the factory floor. While the B-17 was a meticulous, complex machine requiring skilled assembly, the Liberator was built to be quick. Its fuselage was constructed in 5 main sections, easily bolted together, simplifying production and maintenance. This expediency led to the misconception that it was cheap or flimsy. German technical analysts, accustomed to the bespoke craftsmanship of their own Luftwaffe planes, initially dismissed it as a crude example of mass-market engineering. They were focusing on the aesthetics and missing the genius of the substance. The Gestapo's technical officers began their grim inventory of the Belle of Berlin. They were looking for the conventional, thick steel plating around the cockpit, redundant systems, and bulky armor. What they found was a different, far more insidious strategy: distributed resilience. The B-24 had one of the heaviest defensive armaments of any bomber of the era. Not just heavy, but distributed. 10, sometimes 12, Browning AN-M2, 50 caliber machine guns. In the nose turret, the ball turret underneath the waist guns, and critically the tail turret. This gun density created a lethal bubble of flying steel. The German pilots, trained to attack from the vulnerable 12 o'clock high position on the B-17, found themselves facing a nearly impenetrable wall of fire from the Liberator's nose turret, often a Bendix remote-controlled system, or the formidable Emerson electric turret. Oberleutnant Kleist: "We thought the box shape meant easy angles. We were wrong." The tail turret especially gave no respite. It was as if the aircraft itself was looking backwards with 2 enormous angry eyes. The Americans sacrificed speed for a fortress of overlapping fire arcs. Every direction was defended. Every pass was suicide. But the true revelation for the Gestapo team lay in the material itself. They examined the protective armor, not just on the crew seats, but the self-sealing fuel tanks. The B-24 carried over 2,500 gallons of high-octane fuel across its massive wingspan. A conventional tank hit by a tracer round meant instant fire. The American solution: layers of vulcanized rubber and synthetic material that swelled instantly when perforated, sealing the hole before the fuel could ignite. The German engineers were stunned. Their own Luftwaffe aircraft, designed for quick skirmishes, had less emphasis on such complex, heavy defensive measures. They relied on their own skill to evade. The Americans relied on engineering to withstand. This material, designed in wartime secrecy, represented a leap in passive defense. Furthermore, the B-24 utilized an advanced system of armored glass and crew protection made of high-grade steel alloy, strategically placed in vulnerable areas like the cockpit floor and around the gunners. It was not a uniform heavy shield, but a smart, localized application of hardened steel that maximized protection for the vital organs and crew without grounding the aircraft with excessive weight. Engineer Johnson: "It was simple math. A dead gunner means 3 dead enemies on the next pass. Our job wasn't to stop a direct flak hit. Nothing could do that. Our job was to keep the men alive long enough to survive the fighter attacks. A little bit of tungsten steel around a man's chest and head could mean the difference between making it to the North Sea and becoming a casualty report." The analysis of the B-24's hydraulic and electrical systems revealed another layer of defensive thinking: redundancy. Multiple isolated hydraulic lines for flight controls and separate electrical circuits meant that a single shot could not cripple the aircraft's critical functions. The B-24, despite its industrial origin, was a technological marvel of survivability. The Gestapo's initial disdain turned into a cold, professional dread. The boxcar was no longer a joke. It was a terrifying new reality. They had seen high-speed fighters and accurate guns, but they had never seen an industrial giant built for the express purpose of surviving their best efforts. The question shifted from, how do we shoot it down, to how many of these can they possibly make? The focus of the war in the air was about to shift from a matter of pilot skill to a matter of engineering endurance, a change that Germany, with its limited resources, was ill-equipped to handle. The true nature of the American war machine was now sitting in a hangar in a captured airfield, waiting for German experts to unbolt its secrets. And those secrets were deeply unsettling. The captured B-24 was transported under the highest security to the Luftwaffe Technical Test Center, part of the infamous Circus Rosarius unit, which specialized in examining Allied aircraft. Here, away from the front line, the true psychological battle began. The investigation was not merely technical, it was a desperate quest to understand the mindset of the American adversary, an adversary that could absorb staggering losses and still return, wave after relentless wave. The primary investigators, a mix of Gestapo security officials and Luftwaffe engineers, were accustomed to the precise, almost artisanal quality of German military equipment. They prized elegance and cutting-edge performance. The B-24 challenged their entire worldview. The first puzzle was the Davis wing. Its high aspect ratio gave the Liberator its phenomenal range, but it also contained a series of interconnected, leak-resistant fuel tanks. Unlike the B-17, the B-24's wing was almost entirely structural and fuel storage. When damage reports came back from fighter pilots, they spoke of entire sections of the wing being perforated, yet the bomber continuing its flight. The German engineers discovered that the integral wing structure provided inherent strength, a type of structural redundancy that their own designs, built for high-speed maneuverability, lacked. German engineer memo: "The American design is not refined, but it is brutally effective. The structural integrity is based on redundancy and the compartmentalization of damage. A hit that would cripple a Junkers or a Heinkel is absorbed by the Liberator. They have engineered an aircraft that can literally fly with a mortal wound. Their focus is not on avoiding the hit, but on surviving it. This is a terrifying tactical position." This realization provoked a profound shift. Terror replaced ridicule. What was once a target of derision, the boxcar, became a symbol of the overwhelming industrial capacity the Reich was up against. The very characteristics the Germans mocked, the unglamorous, mass-produced nature, were in fact the greatest threat. The psychological impact on the German fighter pilots was immediate. They were highly trained professionals, often veterans of the Battle of Britain and the Eastern Front, who took personal pride in every kill. They were facing an adversary that seemed to negate their skill through sheer resilience. Pilot Hans: "We hit them with everything. 20mm cannon shells, 30mm rounds. They burned, they smoked, they broke formation, but they kept flying. It's not a battle, Erich. It's an execution that never ends. You destroy the machine, but the machine will not die." This psychological terror was compounded by statistics. Germany's industrial capacity was finite. Every lost Messerschmitt Bf-109 or Focke-Wulf FW-190 was a precious resource, requiring thousands of man-hours to replace. America was churning out B-24s at a peak rate of 1 every 55 minutes. The equation was simple and deadly. German aircrews were being depleted faster than American factories could be halted. The Gestapo's intelligence report on the captured B-24 was devastating. It detailed the multi-layer defensive systems, the advanced oxygen supply for high-altitude survival, the self-sealing oil lines, and the complex hydraulic boost system that allowed the pilot to manually control the heavy machine even if power was lost. They learned that the aircraft was designed to suffer a 90% failure rate on its non-vital systems and still limp home. The report concluded with an undeniable truth. Any attempt to directly counter the B-24's defensive armor with heavier weapons would require drastically modifying their own fighters, reducing speed and maneuverability, sacrificing their greatest asset. They were trapped. They could not out-engineer the American industrial behemoth, and they could no longer rely solely on pilot superiority. The findings from the Belle of Berlin were rushed to the highest levels of the Reichsluftfahrtministerium. The captured B-24 had become a mirror, reflecting not just advanced defensive technology, but the terrifying reality of total war, a war of overwhelming industrial output and engineered survival. The laughter was gone, the mystery was solved, and in its place lay a crushing strategic fear. The revelations unearthed by the Gestapo's technical assessment had little time to disseminate before the Liberator was thrown into its ultimate bloody test. The true climax of the B-24's story was not the individual dogfight, but the strategic, overwhelming application of its industrial might and its engineered refusal to quit. The proving ground was Ploiești, Romania, August 1st, 1943, Operation Tidal Wave. This mission was audacious, almost suicidal, a low-altitude strike against the heart of Hitler's oil supply. The B-24 was chosen specifically for its range and its massive bomb load capacity. 5 groups, nearly 180 aircraft, flew hundreds of miles over enemy territory, flying so low they were within small arms range. This mission would prove the B-24's tenacity beyond any technical report. The Germans, forewarned by intelligence leaks and anticipating the move, had turned the Ploiești complex into one of the most heavily defended targets on the planet. Anti-aircraft guns, camouflaged machine gun nests, and a deadly ring of Luftwaffe interceptors waited. It was a perfect, gruesome test for the Liberator's defensive integrity. The human experience in that cockpit was one of utter sensory overload. The smell of high-octane fuel, the pounding heat of the sun, the terrifying proximity of the ground, and the blinding flash of explosions. It was chaos governed only by the discipline of the pilot and the resilience of the aircraft beneath him. Lieutenant Hughes. It was like flying through a shredder. Flak was coming up from the ground. They were shooting at us with rifles from the towers. My right engine was on fire. The hydraulic lines were severed. The bomb bay doors were jammed, but the plane was still flying. That B-24 was like a boxer who just refused to go down. It ate the punishment. The losses were catastrophic. 54 aircraft were destroyed, 55% of the force was severely damaged, and over 500 crewmen were killed. It was a massacre. But the German cost was equally devastating. The refineries were crippled, reducing Hitler's fuel supply by a staggering amount. And the sheer number of B-24s that limped back, riddled with holes, engines dead, and entire sections of their control surfaces shot away, finally proved the Gestapo's internal fears correct. The B-24s returned not as pristine machines, but as flying sieves, held together by the very layers of redundant engineering and dispersed armor that the technical report had detailed. The high-altitude performance of the Davis wing, combined with the self-sealing tanks, had given the crews just enough time, just enough lift, and just enough fuel to cross hundreds of miles of hostile territory and make it to friendly ground. The arc of transformation was complete. The B-24 was no longer the awkward boxcar. It was the Liberator, a machine that carried its crew home when all hope was lost. It was the physical embodiment of the American philosophy, a machine designed to survive, not just to fight. The industrial strategy of manufacturing a bomber that was easy to repair, easy to replace, and engineered to take a punch had succeeded. By 1944, the Luftwaffe technical team had done its best to incorporate the lessons learned from the Belle of Berlin, but it was too little, too late. They could not replicate the industrial scale, nor could they afford the materials. They were forced to sacrifice the speed of their fighters to mount heavier cannon, weapons designed to shatter the very armor they could not build themselves. This tactical change slowed their precious interceptors, giving the American escorts like the P-51 Mustang a decisive advantage. The B-24's passive defense had changed the dynamic of the German offense. The Second World War would end not just on the battlefield, but on the assembly line. The B-24 Liberator, the ungainly giant that the Gestapo tested, the machine that baffled German engineers, ultimately became one of the greatest strategic weapons of the conflict. Its legacy is not just in the bombs it dropped, but in the lessons it taught the enemy about the true nature of modern industrial warfare. By the end of the war, American factories, powered by Henry Ford's revolutionary Willow Run plant, had produced an astonishing 18,482 B-24s, more than any other American aircraft in history. This number alone was the ultimate proof of the B-24's thesis. The sheer scale of production, combined with its engineered survivability, created an insurmountable wall of attrition for the Axis powers. The Liberator flew every theater, from the frozen convoys of the North Atlantic as a sub-hunter to the vast distances of the Pacific as a long-range maritime patrol aircraft. It proved that the future of military aviation lay in versatility, in range, and above all, in the ability to endure. Sir Robert Thomson. The B-24 was the physical manifestation of America's economic superiority. The Germans focused on perfection. The Americans focused on production and protection. When the two strategies clashed, the one built for endurance, for sheer volume, always prevailed. The Liberator may not have been the prettiest bomber, but it was the one that won the war of numbers, and it carried home the pilots who would later build the post-war world. The human legacy is perhaps the most profound. For the tens of thousands of airmen who flew it, the B-24 was a flying coffin one moment and a lifesaver the next. Its ability to absorb punishment was a constant source of disbelief and grim pride. They knew their plane was the product of a design philosophy that saw their lives as resources worth protecting with every inch of armor, every self-sealing layer, and every redundant cable. The lessons from the captured Liberator, the emphasis on distributed armor, self-sealing fuel systems, and component redundancy, became the bedrock for post-war military and even commercial aircraft design. The modern commercial airliner owes a debt to the industrial resilience engineered into that boxy, wartime bomber. The concept of an aircraft that could survive multiple system failures was born out of the necessity of the war and the terrifying efficiency of the B-24. The Gestapo officers, in their cold clinical analysis, had unknowingly catalogued the death warrant of the Third Reich's air superiority. They had seen the enemy's resilience firsthand, and their reports became a testament to the fact that technological superiority is meaningless without the industrial capacity to sustain it. The Liberator, the machine built to survive, continues to define the strategic air war. It was the right machine, at the right time, built with a silent, iron skin. A testament to American ingenuity and the indomitable will of the men who flew it. If you found this untold story of engineering and courage compelling, let us know in the comments below. We bring you deep-dive documentaries like this every week, analyzing the technology, the strategy, and the human drama of history's greatest conflicts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to uncover more secrets of the war machine.